Hey everyone, Ann O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the author journey. As I've been saying on all my social media and the last couple weeks on the author journey, we are celebrating award season here in Atlantic Canada. It's like the Oscars, to be quite honest. We have the Atlantic Book Awards and the Nova Scotia Book Awards coming up in June. So what I'm trying to do is get as many shortlisted authors on prior to those awards as I can, because there's quite an amazing collection of authors and incredible works that are being recognized, and they all should be recognized. And so we're very happy today to have one of the authors of a shortlisted book, Joanne Roberts, and her book, Storm the Ballot Box, is one of the Nova Scotia Book Awards, Margaret and John Savage First Book Award for Nonfiction Shortlisted Books. I've started reading it. It really is a book that draws you in, and I'm so excited to have Joanne with us today to tell you a little bit more about her inspiration. But I'm going to tell you just a little bit about her before I bring her up. She's an award-winning journalist, passionate about democracy, public broadcasting, and fighting climate change. She spent 20 years as a CBC radio host and covered the 2010 Winter Olympics, the NHL riots in Vancouver, and more elections than she can count. She was a candidate in 4 elections, a runner-up but never a winner. She is also the former interim leader of the Green Party of Canada. She has an MFA in creative nonfiction from King's College, class of 2023. Her book, Storm the Ballot Box, An Insider's Guide to a Voting Revolution, came out in March 2025, just before the federal election was called. Very timely. Her goal is to get Canadians excited about voting and demanding improvements to democracy. Those are very lofty goals, but this is somebody who can certainly get us excited about exactly that. So please join me in welcoming Joanne Roberts to the author journey.
Hey, Anne, it's great to be with you. Thanks for that lovely introduction. Boy, I want to meet her.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Just the amazing things that you've done. But this is your first book, but it doesn't mean that you haven't written a lot over your career, especially, as a journalist and then as a candidate. What are some of the things that might overlap with all of those different styles of writing?
Well, it's interesting because I knew you were going to ask about the author's journey, and I thought, would I say I was an author before I wrote this book? And I'm thinking, as a journalist, I didn't think I was, but I wrote every day for 40 years. I did work in print, and you get to write a little longer, but most of the time I was writing 30 and 60-second bits, right? But I wrote every day. And in some ways, writing was what I did. I did a lot of talking too, but you'll understand that's something I like to do. What I thought the overlap is in curiosity, right? I haven't met an author yet who isn't a curious person, and we go down a lot of rabbit holes. So the overlap, in my opinion, is that you're curious enough about something to want to go deeper into it, and then your instinct is to want to share it. And most of us who write, this is the way we can share it. So that's where the overlap is. I mean, obviously there are different styles of writing, and I certainly am still working on that, allowing my creative stuff to come out. Because as a journalist, you really kind of you wanted to be creative. Yeah, you tamped it down.
Yeah, unless you're writing an opinion piece, you're on the editorial board of a paper or something. And it's interesting, you and I have a similar pathway, although I was on the PR side of things. So tons and tons of writing every day, but then shifting. And I found when I wrote my first book, it was a nonfiction, I loved the process. So obviously, all the writing you did, the daily writing, really helped set the stage to create that habit. But how did you make that shift?
It's interesting because it's one of the reasons I decided to do my MFA.
Mhm.
And I think if you talk to my profs there, they'd say that's the biggest stretch for Joanne, was to get her from writing short things
Yeah.
to long things. And it is a process of retraining your skill set. And so I can remember an exercise, where we were allowed to describe a person that we had interviewed, and I had to force myself to put color in there, right? Like, and not not because I didn't care about it, and sometimes then I had to be careful I didn't get too colorful, but I didn't have to feel that I could only put in 100 words, for example.
Right.
And once I got that going, I loved it.
Isn't it fun?
I loved it. You realize that's a part of you that I started writing when I was 11 or 12 years old.
Mhm.
I've got, actually, in this book, I have a couple of things I wrote when I was in grade 6.
I
And
haven't gotten to those yet.
I was amazed. I was a creative writer.
Mm.
And then I moved into the very practical writer.
Yes. Yes. I have a brother who's a news guy, so I get
Yeah.
that. So you loved the process, and you talk to people and authors who say, oh, I'm not sure what I want to write, and a lot of the advice you hear from the experts is write what you know.
Right.
So I'm assuming that was kind of how Storm the Ballot Box kind of.
Yeah, I think it was right what you know.
Mhm.
And, my first proposal for this book was so big you would think I personally was going to save democracy, right? Like,
Maybe you will.
my working title when I started was Lament for Democracy,
Mm.
because I was a big fan of George Grant's Lament for a Nation. So I thought I'd play on that. The other thing that my mentors helped me was, let's get that story down to something manageable, Joanne. Let's find out what you really think in this book you can tackle.
Right.
That was so helpful. And when I talk to writers, that's one of the things I say, yeah, start with your big idea, but then find out where in that big idea is something you can drill down on, right?
Yes.
That you can be, because people want, well, if you're writing nonfiction, they often want something specific, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, we can all write a philosophy book, but I think in the end we want something. So it's that combination of finding good stories that illustrate good points.
I love that. And so if you were to encapsulate like the purpose of this book, what would that be?
I mean, I do want some, reform. The book has 11 things we should fix about, or 20 things, but 11 that are responsible. And good for my editor. My editor said, Joanne, you have to put 20 things in a list at the back of the book in case someone doesn't read the whole book. And so if you go to the back of my book, you'll find 20 things to fix to get more people voting. Because my goal is very clear. I want people to vote, and I go from the vote on a holiday, which is very practical, to let's look at proportional representation, although it's not just a book about PR. So I think that's important. You have to know, what do you want your book to achieve? It may achieve other things. I mean, people are going to find things in it you hadn't thought about.
Absolutely.
But you want it to do at least the one thing you set out to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just showing the shortlist revealed link on the screen here, just to reiterate and restate, your book has been shortlisted for the Margaret and John Savage First Book Award for Nonfiction. I mean, that's big here in our region. So how did it feel?
Big for me too. I mean,
how did it feel when you were notified?
I mean, you know what? I bought a bottle of champagne and took it to the publishers. I was so excited. And, I think all writers have a certain amount of insecurity, even the famous ones. But when it's your first book, I think your insecurity is really big. Even when you sell it and you go out and you talk to people who've read it, but to have your peers say, we thought it was a good book. We understand it's your first one, but we thought it was a good book. That meant the world to me. I said to someone, and I know everyone says this, you know, winning would be great, but there are two other very good books I'm up against, and I feel that it's achieved for me what I wanted. For someone to recognize that it was good enough to make these three, I'm pretty pumped.
I congratulate you for sure. So what I really like about this book, and like I said, I'm just a little ways in, and I would hold it up, but I'm reading it on my Kobo.
Oh, good. I'll hold it up for you.
Oh, thank you. Perfect. And I will also put this up as well while we're chatting about it. And this is your Nimbus page. So it's a good place for folks to go and find out where they can buy it. You can buy it and even have it delivered or pick it up at Open Book, I would guess.
Oh, absolutely. Or all of the local bookstores. And if you get a hold of me, go on my Instagram or something and DM me. I'll come to your house and sign it.
I love that. See, that's enthusiasm for you. And it's so important because that's a whole other conversation, the marketing piece, like after the dust clears. But the one of the many things that I'm enjoying about this is the very personal feel of this book. This isn't a how-to. This isn't a textbook. This isn't a walk you through, you know, what does each party look like? You know, what is the history of democracy? I mean, there might be a little bit of that flavor like interwoven, but it's Joanne sharing her story. So talk a little bit about, you know, what that means. And, you know, there's something about the whole strategic voting that, I mean, I confess, I didn't even know I was doing it, but I fell into that trap. So
you're not alone.
I know. And I felt, when I was reading, I'm like, oh my God, I did that. So explain what that means.
I would say too, Anne, that one of the hardest parts of writing this book in some ways was pulling those stories out of myself. Because, you know, as a journalist, you try and keep yourself out of the story a lot of the time, right? You're not writing about yourself. You're writing about something else. But every chapter I try and start with a personal anecdote that tells you something that relates to what the chapter is about. Strategic voting is something everyone has done. It's where you think you can figure out who's going to win, and that's who you vote for. Even if that's not who you necessarily want to win, it's someone you don't want to win, and you decide on this person would be better than that, or this is who I want to win nationally, so I'm going to vote. Anyway, it's a very complicated thing to do. And the truth of the matter is, all the research will tell you, in most cases, it doesn't work, right? Because you can't know how everyone else is going to work. What you can know is what the polls say. Right. And I have a whole chapter in there on what the polls can do to the outcome. And I've interviewed, you know, the big pollsters about that. But I think why that is hard on a candidate. And, you know, there's a story in the book about basically losing. In my first run, I came second. I was running in Victoria, BC for the Green Party, and I lost to a New Democrat, even though the Liberals won the country. Because the New Democrats ran on, if you vote for the Greens, the Conservatives will win, which was a lie, but that's okay. You know, we all kind of paint a picture. And I didn't realize that people would do that. I knew about strategic voting, but I thought it would be, if we want to get rid of Harper in that case, we will vote for somebody else. And I thought I could convince people that I was that somebody else. And so I lost. I like to say I lost to strategic voting. I didn't lose to another person. I lost to strategic voting. And that was a real eye-opener for me. And it was very hard to accept. I mean, losing is always hard. And lots more people lose than win in elections. So we should remember that. But it taught me something very valuable about, I had covered politics for 40 years as a journalist, 20 years as a radio reporter. And still the reality of that had not hit me. And this is the one thing I felt I really could bring to this book that someone else couldn't. And that was, I had 10 years of experience in a political party, running for office, examining politics from that side, from the back room instead of the newsroom.
Mhm.
And that gave me and I'd never won. And people go, well, that's not useful. Yeah, it is. Because if you win, you have a very specific way of looking at things.
Yeah.
And winners tend to write these books, not losers. So
But you weren't just a political candidate. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah.
Your political involvement, you have such a broad base of experience to pull from.
Yeah.
And the analytical mind of a journalist, and the passion for digging, like for the truth, or the passion for presenting a balanced piece of work. Do you think it's balanced? Like, I think that your intention is to make sure that it's a book for everybody, because it doesn't matter like what your leanings are. This is an important book, especially right now in what's happening in our world, in our continent and in our own country. So
yeah, I think it is a balanced book. I mean, I don't apologize for a minute that my stories are going to be from my political experience, which was in the Green Party. Mm-hmm. But Kim Campbell, who's a pretty famous conservative, wrote the foreword to this book. And I specifically wanted Kim, who I had met and doesn't know me very well, but she read the book and said, yeah, I think this is valuable. I tell a number of the stories in the book of Liberal candidates who I got to know and how this affected them. I would say that what I hope for this book, and the people who won't like it, the people who will say, oh, well, she's just, dreaming, are the people who benefit from a low voter turnout. And to be honest, that's almost everybody who's in power right now, right? There is, political parties, and I learned this, are very good at knowing who votes for them. And they know how to go get those people and make them vote again, or encourage them to vote again. So when you look at 40% of our population that doesn't vote, that's pretty high. And they don't know how those people are going to vote. So they don't really want them to vote, because they might vote for other parties. And it's a catch-22 that I'm trying to expose here, that getting more people to vote is good for democracy. It won't necessarily change the outcome, but people will at least care more, because if you vote, you care.
Absolutely.
And if you don't vote, all you do is ignore them. Right. And too much is happening. I mean, I'll be critical of what happened here in Nova Scotia in our last election, which was in December. That's a terrible time to hold an election.
You can be critical.
And, the premier, who up until that point I hadn't had much complaint about, had brought in fixed date election dates, so it was going to be in July, also not a good time to hold an election, but better than December. Broke that idea, held a quick election that nobody was ready for in December. People are not worrying about an election in December. They're getting ready for Christmas. And the other thing people think, and this is well documented, if they're holding a snap election, it's because they know they can win it. That's why they hold them. There's lots of examples that I give in the book of premiers who decide, I'm going to the polls ahead of time because they know they can win. Public's not stupid. They go, well, I guess he knows he's going to win, so he's going to win. Why should I bother voting? The turnout in Nova Scotia, and we're good voters in Nova Scotia, was below 50%. Was below 50%. I think that's appalling. I do not think that should be considered a valid election. But the truth is, it gave him a supermajority, and we've seen the result of that. Right. I mean, and this is not me criticizing policy. This is me just saying that when a party gets that much power, they don't have a lot of constraints. And the public, but the majority of Nova Scotians didn't give him that power because they didn't vote for him. Didn't vote for anybody.
Right. And so what scares me. Yeah, what is your message to that, like, half of the population who didn't go out to vote? Like, what is your message to them?
Next time, if you don't like what's happening now, make sure you vote next time.
Mhm.
And most people don't vote because they don't think their vote counts. And yes, in first past the post, there are a number of votes that don't count. I'm going to have to be right up front with that. On the other hand, if you don't vote, you're giving someone else your power.
Right.
You're just handing it over, saying,
Yeah.
here, you do it. I'll go with whatever you like.
Right. You are a mind reader, because my next question was going to be like the comparison between the elections process, between Canada and the US. So you made a comment, first past the post.
Yes.
Explain and I know that you explain it in your book, but why don't you share what that means?
Okay. First past the post means winner takes all. If you have 4 people running, the person who gets the most votes, no matter how many they are, wins. So we're not trying to get to a 50%, level and then have a runoff or anything like that. The person who gets the most votes wins. And it doesn't matter how many people turn up. It doesn't matter what the percentage of the vote was. And we have a number of elections that we like to say are won by a false majority, because they got a majority in the legislature, but they did not get a majority of the votes. And I think that needs to be fixed somehow, because it is discouraging people. The other really scary thing is that if you vote in the first election you're eligible for, you will likely vote in every other election. You might miss one or two, but you're very unlikely, because you know how it works. You feel the power of it. If you miss that election, you're unlikely to do that. And the 18 to 24-year-old cohorts are getting down to, well, our last election, they were a little bit higher. They were 56%, but they've been down at 48 for quite some time. In my opinion, that is one of the most urgent things we faced, because this means a whole cohort of voters that we're losing because they've given up. And, in a crisis, they might come back, but maybe not.
I think every university campus should be a polling station.
Yes, that'd be a good start.
When I was living in Halifax, mine was at St. Mary's University. So, I think that is, it's right under their nose. It's easy. They're hopefully, being more aware of the process. But getting back to Storm the Ballot Box, do you have an excerpt you would like to
I will read you a very short one.
Okay.
And every politician has door knocking stories. It's something we like to trade when we're together. This is one of mine. So the chapter starts with me talking about a volunteer and I are out knocking on doors. The next address on our map is across the street. I climb the concrete steps of the light blue bungalow. The landing is very small and the screen door is weathered. There's no garden, no landscaping at this address. Our list from Elections Canada says 2 voters live here. Based on the names, it's probably a couple or a mother and son. There's no doorbell, so I knock, gripping my campaign flyer, which is like a long postcard with a big picture of me on the front and some information on why I'm running on the back. I'm about to write, "Sorry I missed you," on the postcard, because no one has come to the door, and I'll leave it in the mailbox, when suddenly the door is flung open. Whoa, I step back and stammer, hello, hi, I'm Joanne Roberts. I try not to stare. A young man's massive body fills the doorway. He has wavy brown hair down to his shoulders, and he is stark naked. Or at least I think he's stark naked. His massive belly is making it impossible to tell if he's wearing briefs. I go on autopilot, still talking, trying to figure out what to do next. My mind is racing as I begin to process the enormous tattoo stretching like a billboard from one shoulder to the other across his chest. It's in an old English font, and each letter is about 6 inches high. I must have finally stopped talking because he speaks. I don't want your brochure. I don't vote. Why not? I ask. This is an important election. Maybe I can give you a reason to vote now. I don't vote, he says, slamming the door. That's when the tattoo registers. Mama's boy. I didn't have a chance to ask Mama's boy if his mother was indeed home or if she was a voter. I kind of wish I had. I've never forgotten Mama's boy. His image comes to mind whenever I wonder why people don't vote. I'm not sure what his reasons were, but I know he's not alone. As I've mentioned before, 11 million Canadians don't vote. Mama's boy fits the profile of the highest group of non-voters. He's male and between the ages of 18 and 34. Other indicators that a person is unlikely to vote are that they do not have a university degree or they have a very low income. When Elections Canada asked Canadians why they hadn't been voting for several years, the top reason was not interested in politics. So let's turn the question on its head and ask, why do Canadians vote, particularly Canadians who are 18 to 34?
Ooh. Oh gosh, you know what? The door-to-door thing is so daunting, I would imagine. You know, I worked for somebody who had run for office, and you know, I did everything from follow her around with the leaflets and standing on the corner with a sign.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But I love it in your book when you say you walked up to your office and there was a life-size poster of you. What does that feel like to see yourself, a life-size image of yourself?
It's daunting. It's pretty daunting, to tell you the truth. And you know, you can't win an election without knocking on doors. And once you get started, it gets better. But you never know what you're going to run into. That being an example I'll never forget. But I think it is important that the chapter that comes from is called Raising a Voter. And it is about what parents and teachers and whatnot, what role they can have in raising voters.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we have 4 children and I interviewed them all. They're my own little focus group. They're all grown now and have kids of their own. But I asked them, you know, you're all active politically one way or another. But what was it about growing up that you thought about politics? And it became really interesting. You know, it was meeting politicians, not as politicians, but in the community. It was, in one case, we have a daughter who's an artist. She was impressed by, you know, campaign art. You know, like, and it is about looking at ways we bring people into the process.
I remember growing up, it was always really important. Like, you voted as soon as, like we were taught, as soon as you are of voting age, you will get out and you will vote. However, the 2 things you were never allowed to ask somebody because it wasn't polite was, how much money do you make and who did you vote for? So I was raised that way. You know, I'm obviously, you know, left leaning, you know, but once I get in that voting box, you know, I have always tended to vote for the person and not the party. And until more recently, and of course I lived outside of the country for 25 years, but from my impression is until more recently, it wasn't quite as acrimonious.
I think you're absolutely right with that, Anne. I mean, there's always been, my grandmother lives in PEI, or she's gone now, but she lived in PEI. And my grandfather died when I was quite young. And when she was about 65, she was considering remarrying an old friend and neighbor. And I said to her, I said, you know, Nanny, what's taking so long? Why can't you marry Herbie? She goes, honey, he's a conservative. So and then when they got married, I said, oh, well, what happened? Is he going to vote Liberal? And she goes, no, we agreed to have 2 signs at the end of the lawn.
Oh, oh my goodness. That's so
like only in PEI, you were kind of born with your voting card. But,
yes, absolutely. Yes.
But, you know, I laugh at that. But at least it was something people talked about.
Yes.
And you could be friends with a person who voted the other way. And, you know, you talk at, And I worry right now that we're becoming very polarized and we're not
Yes.
talking to each other. And I do think that political parties, as I said a few minutes ago, have something to gain from that. And it's important we get back to the first role of an MP is to represent their constituents, no matter who they voted.
Yes, once they're elected.
All of them. And yes, you know, a good friend of mine, Professor Alex Marlin, has written a good book on There Is No I in Team, and it's about the political parties and the strength, the power they're having over their candidates and the voting process. And again, I think it's important that we do talk about it at the dinner table, that we do encourage our kids, yes, go to meet that candidate and that candidate and that candidate. Like, we're not going to tell you which one, you know, is going to get your vote. But here's the thing. While a lot of schools, and I know terrific teachers are doing a great job in schools, while a lot of schools teach civics and get involved during, I mean, I've been to more schools during an election campaign, but it's not mandatory. We do not have civic education as mandatory subject in our schools.
Oh, it
and
should
given
be.
Should be, really should be. And given the amount of information that's coming across the border at us, it's becoming more and more, you know, I've been talking with my publisher about doing a book for the middle school age group
That's a great
on
idea.
this topic. And I think I might call it, We Don't Elect a President, because, you know, there's a sense that, you know, that we're like the American, and this is not a criticism of the American system. It's just ours is different.
It's different. Yes.
Yeah.
Different. And that's a good note to end on. Can't believe we've already used up our time. But oh my goodness. Yes, we have a prime minister. Our system is very different than the US. And I think that everybody should be paying attention. Pick up Joanne's book, Storm the Ballot Box, and it's published by Nimbus. And follow Joanne on her social media, on Instagram at Joanne Roberts Writes, or Substack at Joanne Roberts. And keep reading, and congratulations again on being shortlisted. And I will see you at the awards programs, and good luck. And
thank you, Anne. This was a lovely interview. It was so easy to talk to you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. And same to you. Really, really enjoyed it. And we'll definitely cross paths in the very near future.
We will.
And thank you all for joining me this week on the author journey as we celebrate shortlisted books and the authors who have written them for the upcoming awards. And I hope that you're reading a great book, and I hope you're also supporting local. And we also have Independent Bookstore Day in Canada coming up on April 25th. So get out, support your local indie bookstores, buy one of these shortlisted books, and see what all the buzz is about. So for now, I'll say goodbye, and we'll see you next time on the author journey. Have a great